Okay. Hi everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Lucas. I go by Buzz, and we got contacted by Ken to start this project on wheels and wheels in rate and payoffs and stuff like that. Ken, will you introduce yourself?
Yeah. So my name is Ken Bauman. I run the channel Stacked EDH, and I came up with this harebrained scheme and solicited some folks to do all of the work while I just sat there lazily. And luckily, these two wonderful people and Trenton as well volunteered. And so yeah, I was curious about wheels and cEDH. Do they work out for their caster more often than not? I have my suspicions about that before this study was performed, and yeah, so we're just going to talk a little bit about that. But Greg, do you want to
Oh,
introduce yourself?
yeah, so I'm Greg. I go by Curious Control on Twitter. It's the only thing I tweet about. It's the only thing I know how to play. That's basically it. So before we go into this, Ken, I wanted to ask, what do you think the results show? Like, I don't know how invested you have,
Yeah,
but
it's
they're weird.
they are weird. I mean, it's a tough question. I think that one thing that seems clear to me, and surprise, surprise, right? This is quite obvious, but it was good to see this confirmed, is that the general win rate for casters of a wheel effect declined after Hull Breacher was banned, right?
Yeah,
Unsurprisingly,
very slightly,
and
but yeah.
very slightly, but it was good to see that 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 rate declined. It was also very surprising to me that the win rate between just people who generally cast a wheel versus people who cast a wheel to pay off, the disparity between those rates. I expected wheels to be maybe a little bit more powerful on their own, even though I generally think they're unwise in cEDH, but still, like I was like, well, I can't, that's just my prejudice, and so many
Mhm.
people love them and swear by them, so I expected, it to be closer to 50-50. But the fact that in a post-Hull Breacher meta that, someone who casts a wheel only wins 38% of the time, that was surprising to me. I didn't expect it to be that low. That was the main thing that I'm taking away. And also that I know that Dylan from Play to Win makes this claim that wheels are combo pieces, not card advantage. That's how he conceives of them.
I
And it really
understand,
does,
yeah.
yeah, and it really does seem like our data supports that completely because with a payoff, so in other words, with an A plus B, then the win rate goes really high. But without one, it's
Yeah.
trickier.
Yeah,
There's also okay, wheels are combo pieces. They are also disruption pieces. In case of Windfall specifically, it punishes people for having a really harsh hand size, and if you're trying to go off and suddenly just cast a Windfall, you now have a way bigger options. You have way more options to play around and stuff like that.
Yeah.
but then like we have the same problem with wheels that like I I, I always bring this issue up when we're discussing wheels in cEDH. It's sure you may be looking at 7 new cards, or if someone has like 14 off of a heuristic study, right? You cast that windfall and you look at 14 new cards. Well, everyone else also gets 14 new cards. And with
Yeah.
stuff like Fierce Guardianship and Deflecting Swat, Force of Will, Force of Negation, Pact of Negation, Mental Misstep, like, you're not winning that turn. If you give three
No.
players 14 more cards, like, you're going to get interacted with. And the only times that, in my own personal games, that I've seen wheels actually succeed is when they have a Smothering tied out as well, or if they're able to follow it up with the Notion Thief for some kind of win con. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, most of the time they'll cast their wheel, redo their hand, and then pass the turn, and then the next player wins. Because,
Yeah.
Hmm.
you're basically paying 3 additional mana to look at 7 new cards, and your opponents aren't paying any additional mana to look at 7 cards.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I don't play wheels in any of my decks, but I love having wheels cast against me because I'm
Yeah.
burning no resources to just look at a brand new hand, and it's amazing. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, I've made a list of the three most common wheels that we saw during the research, and Wheel of Fortune is the first one for very obvious reason. It's
mhm.
7 new cards and feeds the graveyard, and with Underworld Reach being so common, it's okay on its own, but it's not that great. Windfall is right behind it, and Time Twisters. And Time Twisters has the advantage of removing cards from graveyard from your opponents, which is, as I said, okay. It's not that good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was unsurprised to see Wheel of Fortune and Misfortune up at the top only because Wheel plus Breach plus LED is now the most popular combo among DDV lists, more popular than Thoracle, Data
Yeah.
Pact, and which makes sense. It's it's all in one color, and Breach, you're gonna run it whether you want to or not for the most part, and LED is fine. It's just sort of an easy inclusion, but again, I would have thought that right now in the post Hull Breacher results, there's a 20% difference between the caster of the wheel wins without a payoff, or rather they don't win without a payoff versus they win with a payoff, and 20% to me doesn't. I don't know. These numbers were both kind of less impressive to me in terms of like what the power of a wheel in a 4-player format, but also confirmed for me that really kind of the wild wheel, unless it's like very early and very disruptive, just sort of the like, well, I ran out of gas and I'm just going to do it and we'll see what we see, that is not wise. And I think a lot of people already kind of know that, but to really see it confirmed here is interesting. But I also know that y'all had brought up the fact that when you're going through these videos, the caveats that you wanted to bring up about what this data might be missing or how it might be misleading in some way. So do y'all want to talk about that?
Yeah, so the data is quite misleading, actually. Because everything was pulled off of YouTube, and it's not like we're not playing our own games and recording our own data for that, and we don't have like 1,000 people collecting data. We're just pulling from 4 or 5 large YouTube channels. The goal of those channels is not to publish games to be analyzed. It's to publish content to be found to be entertaining, right? And in that sense, if there's a game where someone, specifically in the Hull Breacher era, where someone goes like turn 1 end step, or end step Hull Breacher into just a wheel on turn 2, right? And you just strip everyone else of advantage, and yeah, it puts you in a really good spot. That's not entertaining, because that was happening so often in cEDH that channels would start to decline if game after game after game was just like this turn 2 or turn 3 Hull Breacher combo. And so they had to cut a lot of those videos. And then that actually shows, I was surprised when I was actually going over the Hull Breacher era data, and there weren't that many games where you saw like a turn 3 Hull Breacher wheel. But I played a lot. I played a lot during that era, and that happened often.
Yeah.
It really did. And so
Yeah.
there's always that bias. And the other thing is that we did not record what turns wheels were cast on. I feel like I want to redo this again with a larger group of people and take like several months on it, and to go through and really record like which decks were playing, what turns were wheels cast on, what other relevant things were there. Was like there Mystic Remora?
I did put in the payoffs, sort of, when the wheel was cast as turn 1, or and player 1 cast it, for example.
Oh yeah.
Because if player 1 cast it in turn 1, the game goes off the rails. Because the only one really getting advantage from it is the player that cast the wheel. In opposition from like, if you're the player 4th, it doesn't matter that much because all the other players are already set up.
Yeah, because it resets mulligans and it really takes people off their game plan. So yeah, that's definitely something to consider for the next time I look at wheels.
Yeah.
Talking about data, you guys want to go through some numbers or just glance over them? Like, because I do have the number of games that we analyze, so people can have an idea of the scope of what we are talking about. We have 443 games that we analyze, and that includes the Hull Breacher games. And for those numbers, we have a win rate without payoff for 43.8, and a win rate with payoff of 68.4. So the win rate for having a payoff is really, really big. It's how you guys said it. It's a combo piece. It's not a draw engine. That's what it is.
And then what about for the post Hull Breacher era, or without Hull Breacher? What's that data look like?
Without Hull Breacher, the win rate without payoff goes for 38.4%, and with payoff goes to 58.3%, which means that Hull Breacher by itself was a 10% win rate for the payoff,
Good card.
which is absurd.
Yeah.
And you also have to think that everyone has a 25% chance to win the game without like first player bias or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so casting a wheel and looking at a 38.4% win chance is like, that's better than 25. So right now the numbers say that, oh, everyone should be on wheels, right? Especially with payoffs, you have more than a 50% chance to win the game, right?
Yeah.
But again, like we didn't specify how many of those wheels were cast on turn one, and sometimes like 6 or 7 wheels were cast in one game, but it was by the same player who was protected by a silence the entire time. Or it was like
Yeah.
Opus Thief popping off and they give us a wheel into Notion Thief into wheel, and yeah, so we just gotta just make a note of that some of these numbers are slightly off.
Yeah, because we don't have the full context for this percentage win. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's significant, right? I mean, I didn't think that you'd have almost a 40% win rate, post the Hull Breacher, just from casting a wheel. That's significant.
But I do have to say one thing. You said everyone has 25% of winning, and casting a wheel gives a 38.4. The way that actually you're supposed to look at it, it's 38.4% of 25%.
Yes. Well, there's that.
Which means it's like 10% of win chance if you cast a wheel during your game, which is really bad.
That's fair. I'm overlooking that.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think that that consideration is pretty strong, but I'd also say that we know that competitive, or rather, we just know that multiplayer Magic, the variance rate is so insane. I was talking with Michael Levine earlier on Twitter this week, and he was making the argument that when you look at when you try to gauge whether a given deck is better than another deck, that you really have to have such a margin, such a difference between the win rates between two decks in order to say that. One deck would need to be well past 50%, a 50% win rate, in order to say that it's better than any given deck that hovers around 25, just because of the statistical nature of a 4-player free-for-all game. And that's nuts. It's something that we just aren't really going to see very often, which I think testifies to how messy and difficult it is to get useful statistical information about cause and effect for anything in cEDH, but particularly with a small-ish sample size. And 400, around 450 games, in my mind, that's not that small. But again, in order to make some really conclusive claims about this, I feel like we would really need to broaden our scope. So this is sort of, in my mind, just like a direction for future inquiry, but it also is showing that there wasn't something super, super, super conclusive demonstrated, which to me is like that. I feel like the wheel players who swear by them are so confident that if you're not on them, you're an idiot, and that you just have to be on them if you want to play the most powerful effects, and it's just kind of a given. It's like it's a dogma, and I think that this at least shows us that it's not, the data isn't quite there to match that fervor for wheels. Maybe, I don't know. What do y'all feel about that?
I would say that that's exactly it. Like, if it's not conclusive, it shows a lot of stuff for us, and it helps to understand what makes wheels good or bad in certain situations. But it doesn't say, oh, of course now you run wheel, or you should stop using wheels. If you're running I would say if you're running on the Road Bridge deck and you think that my commander doesn't have card draw, I think this would help. It sure, go for it, try it. We are in Twitter right now. Everyone's talking about testing stuff and what's good and what's not. And I think right now is the time to explore and see what works and what doesn't work. And even if a deck runs it and it's really good, doesn't mean that for your deck it will be good. Like, if you're controlling, I don't think it's that great. If you're trying to go off, I think it's a little bit better. It depends on what your playstyle is and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, wheels definitely depend on what your playstyle is. I think that a lot of decks can afford to be on wheels, but they have to have the rest of the game plan to support it. You can't look at a pile of like 99 cards and be like, oh, well, I know wheel is like a good card. Let's just toss it in this list, right? That's like the downside of wheel, because if you don't have 99 cards that work with wheel, then your wheel isn't going to really be giving you the full effect of it.
Yeah. In other words, like if you're walking away from our data with really like one core message, I would encourage folks to consider that message to be that you can't, without context, properly evaluate a card in a deck.
Yeah.
That context is still everything, really. That most of the meaning is in the context of, what is the card surrounded by? What does it play into? What does it play well against? When do you play it? Can you play it intelligently? Do you have that experience, to pick up cues at the table of like, okay, this will probably work out for me, or this is going to be a little too dangerous? Do you know what decks you're playing against? Do you know the proportion of free counter magic that's still available in the opposite decks? Blah, blah, blah. So in other words, I would really hope that people take away from this just a sense of humility and maybe agnosticism about it, that we don't really know yet whether wheels are absolutely must includes. And I think that we have a good enough ground of data to at least doubt that they must be included in any cEDH deck in order for it to be properly competitive. But that now we can just say, well, actually, it's going to depend on context. And it's not just like something that you blindly include in every deck.
Yeah.
I would say that what you get excited about playstyle is the most true. When first we started analyzing one channel, then going to the next, the difference between usages or when to cast it is drastically different. So I would say like the playstyle, it's the thing that you must pay attention when including your deck. If every time you cast and you feel like you're doing something wrong, you probably shouldn't play with.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, you got to trust that. Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah. And then one quick thing I just want to mention is that wheels are surprisingly popular right now, even though, I don't think they're fantastic, but in 20% of the games we watch, there's at least one wheel cast. And that's a lot of games if you think about it. I mean, to be fair, there were 234 games where not a single wheel was cast. But, still, like, a majority of games, there were plenty of wheels. And
I mean,
And as we said, this is for entertainment, the videos that we watch. So in your games, it might be even more.
Yeah. You might be playing in a meta where like there are 4 people on Grixis piles and all they're doing is just casting wheels left and right. And that might work, but in more mid-rangey metas, which is what I typically play in, if you cast a wheel, you're just conceding the game. Like there's no way you win when you cast a wheel. So nobody plays them really. But
and I think that that's a great, highlighting the difference between channels is like, in a way, although again it's optimized for entertainment and not like tournament results or whatever, but in a way that is highlighting the differences in how stark they can be between metagames, and how when we think of the cEDH meta, that is just a euphemism to refer to many hundreds of metagames. Yeah, and so it's really hard, I think, and again that points to me towards a kind of agnosticism or humility even more, that again, like we're just really precluded from saying accurately that, such and such is the case in cEDH, just because it's so big, it's so messy, data collection is in its infancy, and
it's really hard to get data collection in this type of game because multiplayer and the variety of decks, variety of card selection and stuff like that. It's really hard to get data that is conclusive.
Yep, exactly. So hopefully the folks who are watching this and reading the article or looking at the numbers, just spirit of humility, agnosticism. Don't be confident in your choices about your deck. I would always encourage people to do that. Like think through your choices about deck building and play patterns such that you can feel confident, but know that it's really very improbable that any one cEDH player knows enough about the game and all of its possibilities to say conclusively that play Wheel of Fortune or you're dumb.
You're a dummy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just like, I think that now there's a good basis, very empirical basis by which we can say, like, look, no, this isn't night and day. So hopefully this is helpful for you and your local meta and the folks with whom you talk about cEDH.
Yeah.
Cool.
And you're backbuilding from now on. Think about it. Like, don't put it without thinking. Okay, do we need the wheel? Do we run the wheel? Do I like running? And I have to say it. I made a little note here in my notes. Don't play Wheel of Misfortune. This is the one. This is the one.
Please don't.
This is the one that I have to say. Please don't, because you're paying the 3 mana, which we said is really bad, and you're giving your opponent the option like, oh, I really like my hand, so I will keep it.
I have
Yeah,
Fast
exactly.
Oracle and Consult in my hand. I'm gonna pay
Yeah.
0. Like, I don't care.
Exactly.
It's true. Yeah, it's pretty rough.
It's the only wheel that in case someone has a payoff, it doesn't work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, if you
Yeah.
wheel of Misfortune with a Notion Thief, like, nobody's gonna wheel. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, and maybe that's what you were going for. You wanted to pay 3 mana to draw 7 cards, but, like, I don't even know.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Well, do y'all have any kind of closing thoughts or final words for anybody who's watching this or listening?
I would say just have fun.
Yeah, have fun.
That's basically it. Yeah. We did this to see what we got, but for the most part, we are players just as you are, and I think the best part of playing is just having fun and going out with friends. And okay, sure, we have data now, but doesn't mean it's less of a hobby or it's supposed to be data-based. Like, you're supposed to play what you like, and if you like something that's not exactly optimal, but it's still in the cEDH spirit, go for it.
Amen. Super well put.
Yeah.
All right.
So I think this is it. Thank you everybody that is being with us like right now, and hope this helps in your future endeavors.
Thank you, everybody.
Yep. See ya.